Before you click out of this video, I get it, but hang in there. When I first learned about restorative practices, I was thinking that it was just the latest fad in public education, but I gave it a chance. And I've been able to adapt it to an orchestra classroom pretty well. And as orchestra teachers, if we see a bow hold, we fix it. We show the student how to hold the bow right. If we hear an F sharp instead of an F natural, we teach the student about finger patterns. I've made over 200 videos on technical instruction on this channel, but how often do we think about students and their social needs? If a student has an underdeveloped social skill, how do we teach them? A lot of you might already be using restorative practices in some form in your classroom, and it might just be valuable to formalize your knowledge or gather some ideas, and I bet you'll come up with some ideas of your own that will fit your classroom the best. And as we know, values are at the base of the pyramid, and everything that we do comes back to values. Thank you for sticking around for this video. I think you're going to be rewarded by it because this is my secret weapon in the classroom: peer-to-peer coaching. Peer-to-peer coaching is like the partner share from my last video, but now you can use it for technique. You can use it to teach bow holds, bow motion, vibrato, shifting, long bows, you name it. If you haven't watched my last video on restorative practices in the classroom, you might want to go back and watch just to get the general idea. And if you want to see this in action, I'm going to release a sample rehearsal with me in the classroom, which will be Season 5, Episode 10, so check it out. I use a lot of peer-to-peer coaching in my classroom. I also use this rehearsal technique in all of my demonstration videos, so anytime I do a demonstration on technique, I have the students coach themselves, and you can see it in those videos. But in this video, I'm going to give out some tips for how to make your student coaches more effective. And if you've been doing partner and group shares, like from my last video in the classroom, this is going to make this process easier because your students are going to be comfortable with it. Your students need to know how to coach effectively. If they just say, well, that's good, then they aren't a very good coach. Now, are they? Ask leading questions. Give them 3 to 4 things to look at, and then ask, what do they need to work on the most? And this usually eliminates that quick nod and move on approach to coaching where they actually give detailed feedback. You can also ask, where did they make the most improvement? And that'll help put a positive spin on it. So I usually do both when I do this. I do the problems first, and then I do the positive feedback. So basically you burn them down and then build them back up. That's what we do every day, and that's how we get better at technique. And at our concert music too. When you're giving instruction to your coaches, you need to be very specific. Give them a lot of detail so they know what to look for. Pretend like you're explaining it to a beginner. Or maybe you are explaining it to a beginner depending on which class you're teaching. My second tip is to try to break down the technique or passage down to the very basics. Deconstruct and then reconstruct. For newer teachers, especially teachers new to strings, this can be tricky. But fortunately, if you need some ideas in general technique, the entire first season of Teaching Orchestra is dedicated to basic technique and fundamentals. If you're teaching a passage in a musical work, I have teaching companions that I sell on teachingorchestra.com. And my goal when I write a teaching companion is to identify the problem spots in the work, and I break them down to their simplest components to make them easy to teach, because they shouldn't have any holes or missing technique in order to play it correctly. So we break it down and then we put it back together. You can make your own versions of a teaching companion, and it can be really fun, and it can really help your peer-to-peer coaching because it's very specific and they can be very detailed with their observation and give them more detailed feedback. The more fundamental and the more detailed you are, the more constructive the peer-to-peer coaching is going to be. If you're vague, then the peer-to-peer coaching model will not be as useful. In my next video, we're going to do a sample of my version of how to do a circle in the orchestra classroom. So I hope to see you in that video too.